Good evening, everyone. And it's an honor and pleasure to spend this time with you. And I want to extend my own personal thank you to Mark and Jennifer, Sinai Live, for co-sponsoring this event, and to Susie and to the JCC here. I want to make special mention to Raquel, works with Mike, who produced this beautiful slideshow. The Haggadahs that you may have seen for all of history, and I believe the 15 steps that we'll be going through, which I have a mirror image here so I can see what you're seeing, if you know what I mean. So, as I said, it's an honor and pleasure, and primarily because I feel personally and acutely have experienced and seen the great void and I would say hunger, thirst by so many of us, so many Jews. It really extends beyond Jews, but especially Jews, for spiritual relevance in our own tradition. I don't know the numbers, I don't even know their statistics, but it's definitely in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Jews who've either been alienated by Judaism or in the first place never found relevance there. And that's what we have, a situation today, as opposed to 500 years ago, where 99.9% of the Jewish people were performing and keeping a Seder and passion with joy and warmth. Today, I can't say that Seders aren't happening, but it's a far cry where you have at least 90% of the Jewish people who wouldn't call themselves even observant or committed. I don't say this, as you know, in any critical way. I just say it as a statistic, as a fact, and we have to look at ourselves. Why? For me, the operative word is relevance. When something doesn't resonate with personal relevance, you will tend to wander away from it and search relevance elsewhere, which is why there's no surprise if you to this number that 60% of Buddhists in America are Jewish. Yeah, that's not a joke. I mean, that's a real number. So I see it almost like I guess a challenge, if you wish, a competitive challenge, that if we can't deliver the goods, then maybe we don't deserve to have those souls who are seeking elsewhere. So I really find an evening like this, and many others, but particularly now before the Passover, as that type of challenge. Can we rise to the occasion and present and experience the Seder in a really powerful way? I would even say an indispensable way. That it isn't just a nostalgic experience, a nice time for families to get together, or for some people, frankly, it's a nightmare to get together with their families, and just accentuates and amplifies the dysfunctionality of a family, or the denial, everybody sitting around and smiling, and beneath the surface it's hardly that. Or in general, just at best, as I said, a nostalgic, but not necessarily something that you feel you can't live without. That's what I feel is the challenge. I really have heightened the bar, you can say, because I really believe that that's what each of us here this evening have to feel when we go to Passover at the Seder table, a responsibility that whoever we are sitting with, whether it's our family, whether it's friends, whether it's associates, even if you're a guest, to infuse the experience with something that is truly powerful, even life-transforming, and rises to the occasion and does justice to 3,300 years of our history. Because that's exactly the amount of time, 3,320 years ago, the Jews left Egypt. And one thing that they kept to, they celebrated Passover in an unbroken chain all those years. It's hard to imagine that intelligent people were just doing something by rote and mechanically. They did experience it in a personal way. And that's why it's not a surprise that during the Holocaust you hear stories about how Jews went to these bizarre lengths, where they were literally at the edge of the brink of the abyss, death, to find a matzah, to remember it's Passover, whatever they were able to do. Because there's something in the heart, in the soul of each of us, that recognizing that something that's lasted over 3 millennia, you don't have many things that last that long. You know, in business they say, for brand loyalty or family, let's say we've been in business brewing beer since 1876 or what. Or selling furniture for 70 years. We're in the business for 3,320 years, so I think it's a high time we find out why. and what the personal relevance and why this should be an experience that should be indispensable to all of us. So I hope I can live up to that challenge, and I see it as actually a joint effort. I'm just being so to speak, the conduit, the microphone, and hopefully we all can find something in our hearts and souls that we can share with at a Seder and actually really make it meaningful. Because remember, if it's not meaningful, there's only one other option: meaningless, or mediocre, which may be even worse. So that's the goal of this evening, and now with God's help, we shall try to experience it. Now, obviously, we don't have the power and the energy of Passover with us right here, because there's something special that happens that night, which is, I guess, maybe a good point of departure, that there's an energy that enters into existence, into the cosmic world that we know on Passover evening. Because in Judaism, time is like a spiral. So it's not just commemorating events that happened hundreds or thousands of years ago, it's actually being recreated and happening now. So if you just think of it that way, that here's a window of opportunity that comes only once, that itself is already a mindset that can open you up that this is a special evening. So when we say Manishtana, why is this night different than others? This isn't just a cliche or a good advertising lingo or etc. But it's actually a meaning. It actually means something. It means there is something unique that's happening this evening that recreates something that happened many years ago. The question is, what is the energy? What is happening? And we have to look at the Seder, as I will explain, as the tools to excavate that which is happening. So we all know today that what you see is not what you get. You look at the physical universe, you don't necessarily know about all the subatomic particles and about the cellular structure and the molecular structure and the inner structure of existence. We believe, whether it's faith, whether you believe physicists or scientists, whatever you call it. But we know that what the forces that shape existence are not visible to the naked eye. So the same is true with a holiday like Passover, that what you see is not what you get, meaning there's something going on beneath the surface. However, like anything beneath the surface, to access it, you need tools. If you want to dig for water or for oil, you need to have tools. You need to dig for an oil well or a water well, and then you have to send down a pipe or a pail, and you draw the water up. The same is true, the way the mystics put it, is with the Seder. The Seder is a powerful reservoir of power. Passover is a powerful reservoir of power, and the Seder technique, so to speak, the Seder experiences are tools that allow us to dig into our own souls, into these deeper resources, and draw it forth into your life. It's basically what it's all about. So when you look at it that way, it's a whole different type story. It's not just about family get-together, it's not just about the meal, about the good foods, or if you don't like the foods, or unique matzahs. It's about you and your life. Here's an opportunity to access resources that you would not have been able to access otherwise, and here are tools, time-tested tools. What we're left with, just to go back to the so-called challenge that we have, we have some of the tools, but we don't know how to use them. Or we don't even know that they're tools. We don't know what we're supposed to be digging for. So if you ask most people, what's Passover? Some will say Strites matzahs, or Manischewitz wine, or as I said, different type of very superficial translations. Passover, in one word, is transcendence. As the word implies, as the name implies, pass over. You're passing over something. What are we passing over? We're transcending the constraints and limitations of our existence. So if you could say in one sentence, what is the search of all human beings from the beginning of time? It's in some way to relieve existential tension, existential loneliness. There are many ways you can put it. It could be the monotony and the boredom of the daily routine. We're searching for something more. Some search through the tool called love, some through music, some through art, some through religion, spirituality, faith. The list goes on. Travel. But there's no question that human beings are not satisfied with animal bliss, and we do have a need for transcendence. So, the way the Torah puts it is that the first transcendent experience, collective transcendent experience in history, was when the Jews left Egypt. This wasn't just a physical journey, exodus, leaving a physical land called Egypt and finding freedom. It was actually even above all, it was a spiritual freedom. Mitzrayim in Hebrew, the word for Egypt, in Hebrew means constraints. It means limitations. It means boundaries. anything that confines us. So Yetzias Mitzrayim, which means exodus from Mitzrayim, exodus from Egypt, from Mitzrayim, means freedom from these constraints. That's why Seder Passover is such a powerful tradition in Judaism. Because you could ask, who really cares what happened so many thousands of years ago? So they left Egypt. Okay, we'll remember it. But it became so much part and parcel of Jewish tradition in prayers. Even every day we mention it. How many times? The beginning of the Ten Commandments, I am your God that took you out of Egypt. The list goes on. Tefillin, tzitzis, mezuzah. Many of the mitzvahs are all some way connected to the exodus from Egypt. And many don't really know why. Furthermore, there's a statement in the Talmud which is even more peculiar. It says that one has to envision as if they leave Egypt all the time. Why would we have to envision that? How many of you have ever been to Egypt? Anybody here? Okay, a few. But most of us have not, including myself. Yet the Talmud says that we have to envision ourselves as if we just left Egypt all the time. Why? What's the point of that? The answer is it's not about the physical Egypt, it's about the Mitzrayim, the psychological Egypt, the psychological constraints. That's something we have to continuously and perpetually experience. And the Seder night is when it all comes to a crescendo, where we're able to experience in its fullest sense transcendence. So essentially that's the promise that Passover makes to us. You open yourself up, use my tools, Passover says, the Seder tools, and I will offer you in return transcendence. I would think it's a pretty good investment for one evening, or we have two in case the first one doesn't work completely. Now, if you wonder what happens if two don't work, so we always have next year. But next year in Jerusalem, you know. So with that type of introduction, I think this is the key to be able to then address the Seder in a new fashion. That it's not just traditions and rituals, which it has many layers of meaning, and I'm sure you'll hear about it at the Seder table. People will come with all their wisdom. And each of us has our own childhood memories or whatever it may be. But above all, as I said, it's about a spiritual journey and experience. So the Seder table is extremely, I would even say mathematical, the mosaic of a Seder plate, the 15 steps. If you begin to study it, it's a symmetry, which has yet to really be fully appreciated. You can find parallels of the symmetry in art. You can find it in mathematics and in physics, because above all it reflects, sends the structure of existence. And personally, the structure of our own existence, of our own personalities. So with the time that we have here, I'm going to focus on the 15 steps, but suffice it to say that the Seder plate deserves its own discussion, and the 4 cups of wine its own, and the 3 matzahs, and they all have many layers of meaning, much of which is on my website, or our website, meaningfullife.com. What I'm going to focus on is the 15 steps, because that really is like the architecture of the Seder, because it's the flow from the beginning through the end, and make mention of some other things. But I wanted to qualify what I'm saying, that obviously in 1 hour I'm not going to capture 3,300 years of spiritual transcendence. But hopefully with enough tools that each of us can go into Passover in a new way, a new approach. But it's always good, as the Alter Rebbe says, the Alter Rebbe, who's a founder of Chabad Hasidic movement, says that when you have a question, you don't have an answer, you tell a story. And if that doesn't work, you sing a song. Yes, that's where the tradition of stories and songs come from. We have a lot of questions unanswered. And since the Seder, as we'll discuss, is about questions and answers, I thought it appropriate to begin with a little song, which is personally one of my childhood memories, and I had very good memories sitting around the table with my parents and asking the questions to my father, who now I have to ask spiritually those questions since he passed away a few years ago. So there's a tune that we would sing. Actually, it was sung at the end of the Seder, but I thought it's a good way to begin, and maybe we'll conclude with one as well. And it comes from from one of the verses in the Psalms that we say at the end of the Seder, from the Hallel. And I think since it's the message is one of transcendence, maybe this will help set the tone, and then, as I said, I'll enter into the world of words, and going through those 15 steps. And if you know the song, please sing along with me. Keili ato v'yoydeko Eloi kai arai memeko 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 Keili ato v'yoydeko Eloi kai arai memeko, which talks about transcendence. So, 15 steps. You ready? Okay. No foreign substances allowed. 15, as we all know, breaks into 3 parts, 5, 5, and 5. So it's actually a structure of 5 parts. And the first part, as it is with any type of experience, is acclimating yourself and entering into a certain mode or space. The next 5 is getting a fuller taste of an experience, not just mindset or psychologically preparing yourself, but actually doing some things, actual exercises, so to speak. And the third part, the last 5 of the 15, is the climax, the full actualization. So they are really structured in that fashion. So I'll go in order with the first 5. As I said, the general thrust of the general theme of the first 5 is moving into a new type of space. And there's a particular process that's required for any type of experience like that. Because as long as you come with an old mindset of yesterday or the past, it's going to haunt your future. I mean, the biggest thing I find, and I'm sure anyone finds in their lives, even when you're inspired and you're motivated to make a move in your life and to find something new, the challenge is not the inspiration, is how do you maintain it or how do you implement it? And the answer is in one word: you don't until you're ready to free yourself from your attitude or your perspective. If you come with a perspective, a certain particular perspective, you could have all the good intentions. If you're not ready to change that perspective, you are going to be a victim of it. So as good as that perspective may be, you are a product of your perspective, so to speak, of your past. So the first and most vital step in any form of growth or healing or transcendence, as in our case, is going into that new space. And the Seder offers us a very particular and specific way to do so. And you'll see it's in 5 steps, first 5 steps. The first one is Kaddish. How are we doing here? Kaddish. Right, new order. So Kaddish. The word Kaddish in Hebrew means to sanctify or to separate. We say Kiddush comes from the word Kaddish. Kiddushin, marriage, comes from the word Kaddish. So the word Kaddish has many, many applications. It means sanctification, or as I said, a separation. What does separation mean? It means that you're ready to distinguish between, we'll call a mundane experience, just a plain experience, and something that's more sacred, more pure. When you come, for example, into a holy site, you come before the Western Wall, or you're standing before a tzaddik, or you're going to a gravesite to pray, or it's Yom Kippur, your attitude should be different than when you're going into a Starbucks or to do something that's a little more mundane. What's the difference? You're recognizing that this is a special, unique moment. So in Judaism, you'll find everything always begins with a cup of wine. Kiddush. Shabbos, we make Kiddush. On holidays, we make Kiddush. And the Seder also begins that way. Now, obviously, this is a unique Kiddush because it's a Seder of Passover. So we begin with Kaddish, with sanctification of the moment and the time. The prayer of Kiddush is all about recognizing we're in a special moment. So essentially, it's creating space, what they would call in contemporary terms, that if you don't create space, you'll never be able to grow. Because if you come in, as I mentioned, with the clutter of your past, you can't go anywhere. And meditation works this way, and therapy. You look at any type of growth, the first thing that's always required is that you are opening yourself up. One of the Eastern gurus, once the analogy they give, a student came to him looking for the truth. So he said to him, before you come to me, you have to bring a cup of water. So he brought a cup of water, and he thought that this was type of like, I guess, a way of serving the guru, the master. And the master, to his dismay, to the student's dismay, took the cup and turned it over and poured it out. So, he was quite insulted. He'll bring me a cup of water. And then the master said, here's the cup. When you feel like this, come back to me. In other words, if you're not ready to be empty, if you're not ready to change your attitude, if you think you're coming full with all kinds of enthusiasm that you're going to learn a lot, it's about you, then you're going to be, whatever you're going to experience is another extension of you. So Kaddish is basically a sense of like saying, like taking a deep breath and saying, okay, I'm entering into a new space, into a new time, and hopefully something will happen. Now I know cynics may say, well, I tried this many times. Well, I tell you that what's there to lose? Try it out. To be a little honest and sincere with yourself and say, okay, there's a promise here that the Seder can deliver. Let me try. The first that's really required is not just the physical sense of it as making Kiddush on a cup of wine, but the mindset, the spiritual and psychological component is creating space. It's beginning a new order, starting something new. That's Kaddish. Right after Kiddush, comes Urchatz. As you see, I'm not focusing here on the ritual part of it as much as the personal, because that's what we're addressing this evening. So Urchatz, which means to wash, literally means rachatz. From Hebrew comes the word to wash. We wash our hands. Now, just to show you that this is not just some type of small little ritual, you'll find just like Kiddush and Kaddish and Kedusha is a central theme in all of Judaism, Urchatz is also a central theme. For instance, the idea of going into a mikveh, immersing in a mikveh, is a form of washing, immersion. There are mikvahs for women, there are mikvahs for men, there are the mikvahs for the priests. In the time of the temple, they would immerse themselves. There was actually a fountain right outside the temple where they would actually wash their hands. And we wash before our meals, and we wash at different times. Usually washing is a small mini mikveh, if you could put it that way. At the Seder, it wouldn't be very practical for everybody to run into a mikveh. So we do it more, in a more of a microcosmic fashion. What is the part of your body that touches the world? Your hands. You interact with the world with your hands. So your hands are the most so-called mundane part of your interaction with physical existence. So what we do is we wash our hands. So if Kaddish is the mindset of creating new space, Urchatz is like its twin sister, that you are actually creating a type of cleansing, spiritual cleansing. Now, why water? Water, as Maimonides puts it, is comparable. It's a metaphor for knowledge. You find, for instance, in the prophet, the world will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. Water is always an example or a metaphor, the flow of knowledge, transmission of knowledge. You transmit water, it's a form of knowledge. So really, physical water is essentially a spiritual counterpart of knowledge. So when we wash our hands or in the right way, it's not just about cleaning the dirt, but it's about cleaning the spiritual, and we do so through pure knowledge. So essentially, Urchatz, the second step of the Seder, is the idea of cleaning yourself. Cleaning yourself may be from the grime, from the wear and tear of our lives. So as I said, if Kaddish is the mindset, where you're moving to another space, Urchatz is a physical aspect of it, and that when a person truly washes their hands properly, with the right kavanah, and in this case we don't make a blessing, what you have is essentially thinking of what you did that day, the day before, and cleaning your hands in a way. Not necessarily washing your hands from the crimes, that's not what I mean, but really cleaning yourself in a sense of a transition stage. So it's another step in the transition from one space in your life to another. As I said, if you do it not just in a physical sense, but also in a spiritual sense, it has real power and significance. Step 3. Yachatz. Now in the Haggadah, as you'll know, as you'll see, or if you haven't seen before, there are obviously phrases and statements made while we go through the Haggadah. I'm not touching that, I'm just touching the actual steps in this discussion here. But all that I'm saying here is accompanied with phrases or statements or prayers or blessings that are said before and after. But I think the way to really do this effectively is to punctuate it with the steps. So next comes Yachatz. Yachatz is that in the Seder plate, as you see here in this... I did? Oh yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. Hey, how you like that? That's good. And for 20 years I thought it was Yachatz. Okay. They gave me the wrong grip sheets. Thank you. At least somebody's listening. Karpas. Right. So Karpas in this order is the. I have to adjust myself. I was in Yachatz mode. Karpas, literally, there's different interpretations of what the word means. It's somewhat of an Aramaic word. Some say it's an acronym, but what it is essentially, it's a vegetable. Some use onion, some potato. There may be other customs I'm not aware of, but it's a vegetable that is dipped into salt water. That's karpas. And as you'll see, and I want to introduce here another theme that is going to be central through all the steps and through the whole Seder, you'll see that everything is about a certain dual poles, like almost a tug, a paradox of two forces. The general paradox is we are human beings living in a mundane existence with our mortal limitations and all the psychological or emotional fears and insecurities and constraints, and the need in each heart and soul to experience some transcendence. So there you got right there, so to speak, a paradox. You have two forces tugging at you. One is your need to survive, you work, make ends meet, the responsibilities and obligations you have, for good or for bad. And then there's another part of us that's searching. Sometimes this is compared to the body and the soul. The body being somewhat of a material entity that's grounded and is affected by gravity, in more ways than one. And the soul is compared to a flame that transcends gravity, that defies gravity. So if you think of a flame and a wick, imagery-wise, so a flame, you see, is always licking the air. It's always looking to go upward. Ner Hashem nishmas adam. The soul of a human being is like a flame. And the wick is what grounds us. If you have too much flame, you expire, God forbid. Too much soul, you can't really function or exist in this material world. But on the other hand, too much body or too much materialism in turn turns you into a callous human being that doesn't feed the spiritual side of our lives. So the Seder is very much about creating balance between these dimensions. Overall, it's, as I said at the outset, transcendence. Transcendence, but not transcendence at the expense of being immersed in this world. It's living in this world and knowing how to rise above it. So the first steps, as I said, Kaddish Yachatz, help us move from one space to another. Now Karpas, as you'll see with many of the other steps, now begins to, so to speak, engage these two worlds. And you'll see there's a tension, there's a battle. So the vegetable of Karpas, the actual vegetable, why vegetable? We say Bara Priya Ha'adama, the blessing goes, the blessing on the fruit of the earth, not the fruit of the tree, not a fruit, it's the fruit of the earth, meaning a vegetable, because the fruit of the earth is symbolic of our earthiness, of our bodies. If you read the Bible, what does it say? God took the earth of the ground, the dust of the earth, and blew into it a soul, infused a soul within it. So earth is essentially a symbol of our physical lives, and the salt water is a symbol of the spiritual. Now, why salt water? So, good example would be, what's the salty water in our own systems? Is our tears. Tears are salty. The medical community can maybe explain why, but I'll tell you what the spiritual reasons are. Not different than the salt water in the sea, in the ocean. The Kabbalists say that tears bathe the soul. I remember meeting someone, it was actually a few weeks before Passover, a few years ago, and it was a very powerful experience for me because for some reason it brought alive something that I wasn't quite aware of. But this particular person was a very sad human being, suffered greatly, was abused as a child, was really like a pariah in his home, and he elicited a very negative attitude, and he came to me really desperate. I'll be honest, I had no clue what to tell him. I didn't know where do you go? He didn't have friends, he was isolated, he was alone, he had no personality, everything was really messed up. I felt for him, and I really didn't know what to say. And as we're sitting there, I remember he was in my office on the couch, so I asked him to stand up. And he stood up, he had no clue why. And I could tell you that it took him a lot of effort to come there even, to come to me, see me. It wasn't like it was easy for him to speak or to communicate. And I went over to him and I hugged him. I gave him a bear hug, a real strong hug. And I could tell you, I never felt a human being so, like he turned into a piece of stone. He was so resistant. And besides that, he was shocked that anyone would hug him, because he so loathed himself that it all projected. And it was like unbelievable to me. And I said to him, you can relax. It wasn't like he was afraid or anything, he just was completely recoiled into his own knots. And I started crying, simply for his pain. And he started crying. And after a little while, he sat down, we spoke a little more. It's not like I could tell you his life changed overnight, but there was an opening. And I said to him, it just came to me, and intuitively I asked him, when's the last time you cried? So he said to me, around 45 years ago. 45 years ago. He knew, he even remembered. Because the last time he cried was when his father told him, abusive, alcoholic father, that only babies cry. And next time you cry, I'm going to beat the you-know-what out of you. So that was it. He was terrified. So even crying he didn't even have the liberty, the freedom to cry. And what struck me at the moment, and as I said, it was right before Passover, so it really came to me, the power of salt water, the power of tears. What the Kabbalists say, it bathes your soul. So obviously, there's a time to cry, there's a time not to cry. But for a person for 45 years, bottled up, and wasn't even able to shed a tear, what does it do to the human spirit, to the psyche? And I thought to myself an analogy of like a kettle. Imagine a kettle boiling water in a teapot. And it boils and boils and boils, and there's no spout. What will happen? So it'll either explode, or it will implode. Not in a kettle, but psychologically speaking, it will implode. What's the implosion? What will happen? All this intensity of the experience will essentially, if it has no outlet, has no release, what happens is it begins to eat you up alive. This is what we say someone's tied up in knots. And really the body begins to carry all your memories and messages. Now I didn't say all this to him because he wasn't interested in philosophies and stuff like that. And that's not my point here as well. It's just the power of a small little tradition. Taking a piece of, it's almost like a trivial tradition. You take a piece of vegetable, whether it's an onion or potato, you dip it in salt water. Yeah, we do it. I remember as a child we did it. I asked my father, I remember, why do we do it? It's one of the 4 questions actually. But something, it's one of the questions, as we'll soon discuss, there's no answer in Haggadah for. So my father said to me, I remember, he said to me, when you get older you'll understand. So I got older. And I understand that when you get older, you don't understand that. But I never told that to my children. I didn't want to repeat the vicious cycle. So I realized that I came to understand that people don't understand this, and you got to figure it out. And here was this man. I shared with him later. I said, you have helped me. And I think it was a very powerful way to express what I'm saying to you right now, and that is that karpas is the idea of taking a little piece of material, of the material world, earth, and putting it in salt water, is besides making it moist, and we know moisture brings things alive, it's also a release. So what it means for us personally, not that you have to burst out in tears at this stage of the Seder, but at least internally to realize that if you're going to make a move from so-called your material life and want to find any type of transcendence, as I explained earlier, transcendence isn't just a luxury. It could be actually a life-saving experience. It's getting out of your own, whatever it is that constrains you. There is a need to release. There's a need to in some way saturate your own material life with something that's beyond. And that's where the salt water comes in. So the Kaddish Archatz are like the move, the transition. Karpas is symbolic of this type of experience where you take a part of your own earthy life and you immerse it you dip it into salt water, which essentially is like living in a physical world and knowing that sometimes it's good to shed a tear. Sometimes, people cry not for any particular reason, and thank God, the whole point of the Seder is that we shouldn't cry for bad reasons. We should cry for good reasons. Crying for a good reason means you have a memory, you have a dream, you have something that you aspire to. Sometimes you just break out in tears, not because of a particular painful thing. On the contrary, out of awareness, deep awareness, awe. So the Karpa stage essentially is, as you see, setting the tone for something that's going to become much more full-blown in the later steps. It's the tension, the dual tug between the earth and the water, between the material and the soul, between our physical lives and a tear, a salt water. So that is step number 3. Okay. Yachatz? Yeah. Good. Good. How we doing? Are you crying? Okay, good. So Yachatz is step number 4 in the first section of the 5. Yachatz means literally to break. You break a matzah. So I was showing, as I began to demonstrate. So you see the 3 matzahs. The Seder plate has a plate with the different items. One of them being, by the way, the vegetable. And underneath it are 3 matzahs, sometimes compared to the Kohen, Levi, and Israel, the three categories which Jewish people break down into. And you take the middle matzah. This is the actual ritual part of it. You take the middle matzah and you break it into 2 parts. In the custom that I grew up with, one part is like a third, and you break it like 2/3 and a third. It doesn't always work, because sometimes the grain just is such that it breaks into different parts. But as I grew up, the tradition was you break one part, 1/3 and 2/3, and then the 2/3 part you break into 5 pieces. You put it away, and that becomes what will become later the afikomen, which is going to be step 12. Step 12, tzofen, when it will be eaten. And in some homes, you may know the custom. This is the most exciting part for the kids, at least, is where they hide the afikomen, and often they fall asleep, so you don't know where it is. So there's a search for the afikomen, and then they blackmail you to get it back. Different homes have different traditions. I'm not going to discuss that. That's not so relevant to our point here. So you take this is the 4th step, which is breaking the matzah. What is that in its so-called psycho-spiritual symbolism? So no one should ever be broken in life in unhealthy ways, but the fact is life does break all people. That's a quote, not from the Torah, it's from Hemingway. And then he added, life breaks all people, but some are stronger in the broken places. But Hemingway then proceeded to commit suicide. So I guess he wasn't stronger in the broken places. Jewish people have been broken many times, and we are stronger in the broken places. That's why we're sitting here, and that's why we keep celebrating a Seder. We were broken by the Egyptians, and then by the Babylonians, and by the Greeks, and the Persians, the Romans, the Greeks, the Romans, you name it. Broken but not destroyed. In the Bible it says that the more, about the story of Egypt, God says to Moses that, not to Moses, God says in the Torah, it says, as they suffered and were oppressed, the greater they became. In a way, and it's an essence of the Jewish story. So Yachatz is in a way, and even psychologically speaking, a thing called projection. Sometimes by you initiating an experience, you don't then have to allow it to affect you in a terrible way. As we'll speak also about later, eating the bitter herbs. When we break a matzah, in a sense, it's like we're taking the initiative, and you break it, then no one has to ever break you again. So it's a pretty interesting concept. And you could see this in many situations in life. People who are realistic, and they wake up before they're woken up, it's usually healthier. Because when you're woken up by life circumstances, usually it's not in your terms. So Yachatz is the opportunity to create a break on your terms. Now you could say, why do we need a break? Well, we need a break because we have egos. And as I said earlier, we're locked in our perspectives. And if you're not ready to some way dispel one part of your life, to open up, you will not be open to another part. So yes, we all need to be broken. But broken doesn't mean that it has to be disastrous or it has to be tragic. Broken can mean that you were locked in a certain way of seeing things and that spell was broken. Or you were convinced that somebody's a hero and then you find out that they're really not. There are many things. Breaking is not necessarily a negative thing. All forms of growth are part of being broken. If an egg would not break, would not crack, a chick would never come out of it. And water has to break for us to be born in our mother's womb. So breaking is not necessarily a bad thing. Every seed has to crack for it to begin to sprout. Psychologically speaking, we all have to give up something in order to get to another place. You shed one layer of skin to assume a new layer. You shed a more immature perspective to gain a more mature one. You can't have them both. So this type of breaking we'd all consider to be a great gift. And that's what Yachatz is. And this is preliminary so-called 5 steps of the Seder. It's a critical 4th step after the first 3. That is the idea of breaking yourself. You being, so to speak, like the matzah. Now another interesting footnote that you can add to this, matzah, as we shall discuss, is really bittul. It captures the idea of selflessness. So you could ask, why the need to break selflessness? It's like breaking the fact that something is broken. If it's whole, if it's selfish or egoistic, so then of course it needs some humbling. But how could you humble humility, so to speak? Breaking the matzah essentially is an oxymoron. You're humbling humility. And the answer is a very fascinating one. The answer is sometimes humility can be the biggest root of arrogance. Like those people that say, look how humble I am. And I have all those qualities, I'm also humble. Everybody knows this joke has been overused, but it just fits this the bill here, about the guy that's on Yom Kippur, the rabbi is beating his chest and saying, look how I'm nothing, I'm nobody, I'm nobody. Then the gabbai in the shul is also beating his chest, I'm nobody, nobody. And then a simple guy comes in, he sees them beating, he also starts beating his chest and says, I'm nobody, I'm nobody. So the rabbi looks at the gabbai and says, look who thinks he's nobody, So even being nobody can sometimes take on the shape of somebody. It's like the humble one. So this 4th step is essentially really about introspection and not taking yourself so seriously and being able to put aside your so-called conviction or you're convinced that you're right about something. That is a certain taste of humility. It's not yet full-blown because we don't eat the matzah, we're just breaking it. But it's, as I said, acclimating us into the experience. So we've got 4 steps, and I will conclude this first section with Magid. The 4 steps, just to sum it up, it's creating the space, it's cleansing, it's the dipping of the material in the spiritual, the tears, and the 4th, as we just discussed, the humility or the breaking yourself, or opening yourself up to something new by cracking something old. So now we come to the conclusion of the so-called preliminary part of the Haggadah, and this fifth step is actually the primary part of the Haggadah. If you look at a Seder, you count the time, this fifth step takes the most time. It's Magid. So when Jews start talking, they don't know when to stop. So Magid basically is telling the story. The word Magid in Hebrew comes from the verse in the Torah in Exodus, V'yigadata levincha. You shall relate the story to your children. So we say a Magid, sometimes we say is a storyteller. Haggadah is the act of telling the story. Agadah. There are many different versions of how we use the word Magid or Haggadah, but it's all actually a very beautiful word if you're familiar with Hebrew. It's like telling a story. It's not just talking, not just an orate or a speech, a lecture. You tell a story, and we all know a storytelling is a different thing than when someone talks to you, or talks down to you, or lectures you. And essentially, it is about the children. So Magid implies also that we speak to our children and they speak to us. So Magid begins with the famous 4 questions, where the children begin the process of this dialogue, Magid, with questions. And the rest of the Haggadah will be an answer. When I say the rest, I mean till the point of, till the next 6th step, which we'll get to, will be the response. And this is the big bulk of the Haggadah. It starts from the Manishtana, which is the beginning of Magid. We ask the questions, the 4 questions. And then Vavodim Eyinu, the story is told. The adults tell the story, the father, the mother, they tell the story. And this will, as I said, will go for quite a few pages until we come to the next act, or the next 6th step. So what is the power of Magid? And as you see, it is the final step in any of 5 steps that is necessary in any type of growth. So a few points. Number 1 is, it's the power and the freedom to speak. You look at any type of healing system, or any form of growth, you'll always see there's a need to break the silence, as they call it. So though I'm not discussing particularly any unhealthy situation, I just want to use it as an analogy, and then we'll apply it, because in healthy situations the same is true. Every dysfunctional home, every crime, every injustice done by human beings will always be followed, and this is where the real crime is, by silence. As they say in very brutal terms, that the silence was worse than the rape. Because when you hurt somebody, which is by no means a small matter, but if you can say I'm sorry, or you can acknowledge that you made a mistake, and the person who's hurt is allowed the freedom and the permission, the validation that you can cry, and that you could say, I'm hurt. That's already half the healing. But imagine a person is not allowed to say they're hurt, and the person who did the hurting, the perpetrator, doesn't acknowledge it. What happens? So it's like an infection. It's an infection that begins to fester. And every moment there's silence, and it's not opened, the wound becomes deeper and deeper. And then years pass, and comes a point where it becomes the consequences of that are so far-reaching. This is what most of this generation is suffering from. Not just the crimes or the abuses or the different injustices that people have done to us or to others, but it's the silence, the cover-up, so to speak. And that's why, any type of growth, you'll always see the first time, can you express yourself? Some of us can't even express ourselves. We have a problem, we don't even know what it is. I can tell you from my own personal experience in counseling and talking to people, 98%, and I'm just saying that to be not to be completely harsh, of people telling you a problem, I'm not talking about a small little problem, I'm talking about a serious issue, will never be the issue that's really the issue. They may even not know that is the issue, because usually people talk about their symptoms, they don't talk about the roots. If we were able to talk about the roots, we'd already be halfway there. We talk about what's bothering us. You have a headache. I feel anxious. I feel sad. I feel lonely. I can't find a soulmate. I can't find friends, or whatever it is. These are symptoms. Not to dismiss the symptoms, but they're never the root. The question is, do we know what the root is? Usually not, because of the blind spots we have, our own subjectivity. So Magid is an unbelievably powerful tool. It's that you have the right to speak, you have the right to ask, you have the right to challenge. How many people would say today that religion allows you to challenge? Most people say, especially the Woody Allen stereotype of religion, and Judaism particularly, is you don't ask questions. What's that scene there where the atheistic niece asks her uncle by the Seder? So if you had to choose, you're so blind faith, if you had to choose between God and the truth, which one would you choose? So without missing a beat, the pious uncle says, of course God. You hear? If you had to choose between God and the truth. Which essentially suggests, and for many good reasons, because many people actually feed the stereotype, that faith is all about being an idiot, essentially. Mechanical, not asking questions. You're not allowed to ask questions. I don't want to go into a long elaboration on this because it's one of my pet peeves and it will get completely distracted. But suffice it to say that silence is anything but godly. Yes, silence in face of pain, silence in face of the mysteries of existence, but not silence when something has been done that's wrong or when you have questions. So here you have in Jewish tradition, and not something that's 20th or 21st century, goes back thousands of years, children were taught you must ask questions. Even if you don't like it, you're forced to ask questions. How do you like that? You're forced to be free even if you don't want to be. So what is the number one symbol of a democracy, of a freedom? Is the ability to communicate. What was it? Thomas Jefferson said, if I had to choose between the freedom of free government or free press, I would choose a free press. You can quote that. Why? Because without a free press, you're never going to have a free government. There's no accountability. The ability to express ourselves, to ask questions, to challenge, to be skeptical, hopefully in a healthy way, not just to mask your own excuses, but in a hopeful way. So Magid, in the fullest sense of the word, is about dialogue, communication, and real communication, not surface level. You can really talk about things. You could say, why are we here tonight? Why is this night different? Tell me a real answer. I want an answer that will be compelling. And that the people who are asked that question have to be able to answer that question. If they have the question, let them ask it as well. The custom is that everybody asks the 4 questions, not just the children, the parents too. Because we're all in the same boat in that sense. So Magid essentially is about communication, dialogue. Open up a Talmud. It's all about arguments. Healthy arguments. People challenging each other. Someone makes a statement, someone right away is there to make a counter argument. And there's a third one who's making a counter argument. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You may recognize some of these features in your families. But they go back thousands of years. And essentially Magid captures this critical component, and maybe that's why it's the primary part of the Haggadah. Because after you open up a new space, Kaddish, and cleanse, and dip, and then break, with humility, and you sit down, you have a real conversation, then you're off in the right direction. Now if you can pull this off, these first 5 steps, trust me, the rest will go a lot easier. The problem is going to be these first 5 because most people are not ready to go there exactly. Like some people say, what? We communicate very well. We have nothing to talk about, you know? Or we've said it all already. I heard this from you 50 times. You keep telling me we don't talk, you know? So you have to do this in the proper way. As I always say when I do workshops like this, I don't know if you should turn the Seder into a group therapy meeting, but maybe for some it works. You got to be sensitive. But as I said, this isn't just about healing from unhealthy things, because communication and dialogue isn't just for people who are in rehab. It's also for all of us. Well, maybe all of us are in rehab, but including me. But I mean to say, it doesn't necessarily suggest something negative. Communication is healthy no matter what. You want to get new ideas, new perspectives. You need to have a brainstorm, they call. So Magid is the collective brainstorm of the Passover Seder, and that concludes stage number 1. Okay? We say things, we meditate, we place ourselves in a certain mind frame, space and time. So this is where we begin actual experiential. So after Magid comes, Magid comes Rochza. So Rochza is like almost a repeat of what we called earlier Urchatz. If you remember, the second step was washing your hands, and here again we wash our hands. This time it's called Rochza, but the same root, Rochatz. This time we wash our hands with a blessing, and it's going to be followed by actually eating the matzah. So this goes back to the theme I mentioned before. Remember, we're talking about a tension between two worlds. So just as we washed our hands earlier, that was more a state, as the Kabbalists put it, it's a state of washing your hands when you enter into the temple. And Rachza is now a stage of washing your hands as you enter into the holy, section called the holy. So basically, in any type of transition, as one grows, there's always a preparatory stage, you wash. If you know about before Yom Kippur, the high priest would go to the mikveh not once, he'd go 7 times. It wasn't just a repeat. It's because every time you reach a higher level of awareness, you need to wash your hands again. It's a symbol of humility as well, but it's also a symbol of recognizing you're entering into another space and not just saying, oh, I did it already, I washed my hands. So here, basically, this is like the rachza that prepares us for the next 4 steps, which is experiential. And then the rachza leads us into, this is like a dual step, but it's 2 steps. It's maitzi and matzah, and I'll explain each of them. So maitzi literally means, it comes from the word where we use the word in the blessing we make on matzah. We make 2 blessings in the Haggadah. The regular blessing you make on bread, which is hamaitzi lechem min haaretz. So think the word maitzi means, Baruch atah, you're blessing God for the one who extracted bread from the earth. Interesting way to put it. One who drew bread or extracted bread, hamaitzi, who drew out the bread from the earth. That's where the word maitzi comes from. In a sense, when we, for example, make the blessing, so of course you have to pull out the matzah as well. So it is a form of drawing out. So what is the significance of this step? So let me just talk about, in general, remember we said about material and spiritual. The vegetable and the water. So there's a verse in the Torah that says like this. This is in the Bible. Lo ya'al lechem levada yichya adam. Not on bread alone does a human being live. Ela ki'im hamaitzi pi Hashem. But on the spark of the divine that's inside the bread. This is not a Kabbalistic text. This is the Bible, the book of Deuteronomy. So not on bread alone, it's a famous verse, does a person live, but on the spark within the bread. So the word maitzi, when you say draw out, is suggesting more than just that grain sprouts from the ground and comes out of the earth. It's suggesting that we are able to extract, as the Kabbalists put it, divine sparks in every one of our material experiences. So as I said before, everything before was more meditative, now it's experiential. What in essence is the secret to transcendence? One key element is to know that within every part of your life lie embedded, hidden sparks. If you want a more contemporary term for it, hidden opportunities. People like opportunities. But opportunities are sparks, really. Sparks that if you draw them out, they can light a fire. They can warm, they can illuminate. So, the Kabbalists call it bir hanetzutzis, the refinement, the extraction, the elevation of the sparks. That within all of existence there are sparks. More personally, each of one of us is allocated with a certain amount of divine sparks that is embedded where? Your workplace, your personal life, the people you know, the places you'll travel to. And really, it's your mission in life, is wherever you go, is to draw out, maitzi, to draw out these sparks. Bread is considered to be the symbol of all food, but really in a way the symbol of all materialism as well. And maitzi, matzah, halechem min haaretz is the concept of extraction. Now just think for a moment, if you were able to, in your life, just have that type of attitude, that focus. Now whatever it is that you do, in business, at work, in personal life, in recreation, your hobbies, your travel, that wherever you go, you're able to recognize that there's a spiritual opportunity for you. And in some ways it redeems you and it redeems the experience. What kind of life would you have? It's not just an attitude. It becomes a life wherever you go, there's an opportunity. Life is never monotonous. So if you talk about transcendence, the Jewish approach to transcendence is not to escape to a mountain or to a desert and to try to find God or the soul. Maybe some of us need that for a while, The true experience of transcendence is to be able to engage the material world and recognize within it opportunities. And I don't want to embarrass Mark, but I want to use Mark and Sinai Live as an example. It wasn't planned, I just thought of it. Here's a man who grew up, when I met him, he was in the media world, working at Fox, I think, CBS. And in his own way came to understand that his experiences, his contacts, his knowledge, and his wherewithal were in that world, and he learned to harness it and is doing this wonderful work for good purposes, spiritual purposes, to educate, to inspire, recognizing the need for Jews to be engaged on that media level, so to speak, with imagery and all that. Just an example. So here we have Moitzi at work, okay? So when you say that section in the... I just came to, I wanted to use a tangible example. All of you have the same opportunity. You have to look at your lives and say, what is it that you do? And what kind of opportunity can it turn into more than... And this is not a contradiction to what you're doing. It only enhances it. It's another dimension. So when you're at work and you say something nice to a person, there's no way he's going to compromise your work. It's recognizing we're not just there for our own selfish purposes, we're also there to serve. We're there to draw something out, to extract something. So this moitzi is this step, and we actually do it with in the Seder, we do it with a matzah. So remember, when you get to that step, think about that. Okay. So we have after the washing, we come to this stage of moitzi. And what are we drawing forth? We draw forth moitzi matzah, the matzah. Now, what is matzah? Matzah, of course, is a great symbol of Passover. Passover even has the name Chag HaMatzahs, the holiday of matzahs. Many people, that would be this symbol of Passover. So clearly it's a central item. And of course, there's the commandment in the Torah that says that for 7 days, outside of Israel, we do it 8 days, you shall not bring bread or leavened bread into your homes, into your life, and instead you shall eat matzah. Matzah is bread that does not have yeast, that does not allow to rise. It's baked in ovens, certain 18-minute period. It's a whole process. If you've ever been to a matzah bakery, you know what it's about. What it looks like is these flat crackers, as some would call it. This happens to be what's called shmura matzah. It's a particular type. It's not machine-made, it's handmade. It has a particular virtue, so to speak. But essentially, matzah is most symbolized by its flatness, as opposed to, let's say, a challah, which is a full-blown entity in the literal sense of the word. Now, chametz and matzah, if you think of the letters in Hebrew, they're actually the same letters. I would draw it, but it's not going to work right here. So, matzah is mem tzadik hey. Okay, chametz is mem tzadik ches. Just a reversal of letters. The same two letters, mem and tzadik, matzah and chametz share, and one letter is the difference between them, ches and hey. In matzah it's a hey, in chametz it's a ches. Now if you know the image of a hey and a ches, and I'll show it to you. A hey and a ches in Hebrew they both look like let's call it a house. Like a line on the side, a line on this, and a line on top. An upside down, not you. Well, you get what I'm saying. Like this. You got it? Okay. Too complicated. Fine. So a ches. A hay also has three parts, but the difference is in a hay, the left leg is not attached to the roof, so to speak. So in a ches there's a roof, a right side and a left side. In a hay there's a roof, a right side, but the left leg is somewhat separate from the... So that space is really what distinguishes. That small little space is ultimately the difference between chametz and matzah, which makes sense. Chametz and matzah, they're both made out of grain, flour and water. The difference is, one rises, one does not. One is symbolic of ego, an inflated ego, and one is symbolic of humility. That space is the difference. Remember I mentioned the spout? When you're all self-contained and you don't have room to open up or room for another opinion or another approach, you're a ches. You're all contained, but self-contained. A hay allows air into the environment, and always fresh air, and something fresh and new. It's a symbol of humility. So a ches would be like the doctor that says, I'll tell you when you need a second opinion. Okay? And a hey is someone who has the humility that understands that a second opinion means you're not telling me that, that there's actually a second opinion that's not yours. So, chametz matzah, the matzah is a symbol, what they call sometimes the bread of humility, the food of humility. In Kabbalah and in Hasidic thought, there are pages, beautiful, eloquent pages written about matzah. That when you eat matzah, it's actually like eating humility. I know that sounds weird, but it's like consuming humility. You assume what you consume, or as they like to say, you are what you eat, right? So in that case, matzah is a symbol and also a physical expression of humility. So whereas bread would be rich, matzah is like humble. The Jews had to run out of Egypt. They couldn't wait. It's all symbolic of a certain humility. I don't want to go into the long discussion of matzah's correlation with humility, but which you can read about. But basically, this stage is the real essence of all transcendence, and that is humility. Humility. So we talked about it in the context of the salt water before, in other forms meditative, but here's where you actually experience it in the full sense of the word. Matzah is when you actually eat matzah and you make a blessing on it. It's the central part of his real experience, humility. Now this is not an easy one if you think about it, because can a person actually who isn't humble become humble? Can an arrogant person become humble? So most people would say only if they're broken by something. Sadly. Only if something happens in their lives that they realize that they don't have it all figured out, or they're not on top of the world. Many powerful people, when they're riding high, almost impossible to imagine that they could be humble. That's why, as I said earlier, that it's healthier to break yourself before one is broken. So matzah really is a challenge for someone that has difficulty with humility. And I would just say, if you want a meditation, so to speak, for humility, especially if you're sitting with your children, that's always a good humbling experience. And above all, if a person has a sense of awe of something greater than themselves, that's really the secret to humility. Many arrogant people, it's not that they don't have the ability to be humble, they have not found or they have not allowed into their life something greater than themselves. So it's all about them. And as long as they feed that so-called myth, they remain locked in that place, and that's called inflation, self-inflated with their own imagery. The only way a person can really get out of that on their own, as I said, hopefully not waiting for something else to happen, is only really through an awesome experience, through seeing something that is beyond you. Because then, in some way, you recognize it's not just the way I see it. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to teach you, if you feel you're arrogant, how to become humble, per se. I don't know if that's such an easy thing to do. We have to teach ourselves. But I will say this, that there is no real growth, and there is no way to ever experience true happiness or transcendence if you don't have the ability to go to a place like that. So that's matzah. Okay. So we're now with that step, matzah 8. Step number 9. Where are we time-wise? What time? Just checking. 8:36? Oh. How's everybody doing? Okay. Getting hungry? At this point in the Haggadah, I can tell you, so don't feel guilty if you feel this way, I usually get quite hungry. And if I can confess my sins, even though it's not necessarily a Jewish thing, but I have in the past, not lately because I have too many guests at the table, but in my earlier, more reckless years, I did in the past cheat a little. And for some reason the egg was always very appealing on the Seder night. I don't know why, more than ever, because it's like after an hour and a half of the Haggadah, it's just like the symbol of the beginning of the meal, so to speak. So as I said, I have eaten quite a few eggs in my time. So that's just as an aside. I do remember, because I'm starting to feel that way. We're at the 8th thing and we haven't yet sat down for a meal. I'm experiencing. I remember when I was a kid, I think, in my parents' home, and we had guests from Russia, I think they were, and they never had a Seder before, so we were sitting at the Seder, and they were getting very impatient because they weren't hooking into all the spiritual experiences that we were all, immersed in. Not that I was either, but just. And I remember that my mother taking them into the kitchen and feeding them a full meal while we went on. So it's important also, why I'm saying all of this, it's important to also have a little tinge of lightness of spirit at the Seder table as well. Obviously you have to know your hosts and not to break any rules. You break the matzah, not the rules, because you don't want to offend anyone. But I just thought I should add that in, because even when we're in the spiritual mode, it's important also to know that we're human beings, and we should, so to speak, travel with, as I said, lightness of spirit as well. Okay. So now we go on to matzah. We go to, moving along here. Very good. Maror. Okay. Another powerful aspect of Jewish thought is, as I said, transcendence is not about escapism or asceticism, where you escape or you some way separate yourself from the material world, but it's about elevation and transformation. Same is true, it's not about escapism from the sad parts of our lives. So though earlier it was more alluded to, in the sense when you dip the vegetable in the salt water in karpas, step number 3, in this case, we actually, like with matzah, it's experiential. We're actually going to eat the bitter herbs, maror. So usually, the way the Haggadah explains maror is because the Jews were embittered, and they were broken, and so we have maror, they embittered their lives, the Egyptians, through the oppression. So we, in a sense, recreate that experience by eating maror. It always struck me as very strange. It's one thing if you went and got yourself hired into slavery to experience it. Not that anyone's suggesting we do that, but to sit at a Seder table in the 21st century with all the luxuries and prosperity and everything set table, and like this creation of almost like a fabrication of bitter herbs, and make it believe that's like bitterness, is a little weird. It's not that it's pleasant taste, but what is the symbolism of it? It's like somewhat strange. They tell that analogy, the story of a guy that went, an executive. L'chaim, everyone. Let me just take it. This executive that went on one of these retreats. I don't know if you remember these Iron John retreats. There was a whole thing of the big fad in the 80s. Men were going to bond with their masculinity. Effeminate enough and been oppressed. I know it brings a chuckle to the women, but men, they thought they're going to bond with their masculinity, and they went, only men, wearing skins, grunting, and then sweating, perspiring. This was a way of getting in touch with the man in you. I'm not saying it didn't work. I never tried it, but what was his name? Robert Bly? He was big in that, right? Robert or Richard? Robert Bly, yeah. So one guy comes home after a weekend like this, where he spent a good $5,000 probably for to grunt, and he comes home. He comes back to work, and he says he's sharing it at the meeting with a few of his people. He says, a real experience. That was unbelievable. I never perspired like that. So there was one of the workmen who happened to be in the room, says to him, boss, if you want to perspire, come work with us in construction a little. So he says, no, I don't have time for that. On the weekend I had time, I scheduled it, all that. So he answered him, listen, perspiring when you want to perspire ain't perspiring at all, okay? Perspiring when you want to perspire is not perspiration. That's planned, that's your pleasure. Except your pleasure also includes that aspect of it. So what exactly is the eating of the bitter herb? What does it symbolize? Well, if you think in terms, as the Kabbalists put it, that there's microcosm, macrocosm, that everything in this material world, in a small sense, is a macrocosm of something greater. And as I said earlier, the salt water is like the oceans and like this tears. Everything fits into everything. and the vegetable is symbolic of earth and our bodies and everything that's material, and the matzah is symbolic of the humility. So bitter herbs is not just bitter herbs. They happen to be bitter because their root comes from so-called the spiritual bitterness of existence. That's why they're bitter. Just like things that are sweet come from a so-called spiritual sweet place. So it's not about us just so-called symbolically or trying to superimpose some type of bitterness in our mouths. It's actually physical, but it also is about our empathy. That's why an interesting thing in the Seder plate, where does the morah lie in the Seder plate, in the structure? If you know the spheres of Kabbalah, you'd think bitterness of morah belongs in the left side, Gvura. It's harshness. So you can say on the right side would be Chesed, the sweet things. On the left side would be Gvura, the bitter things, the harder things. Why is it in the middle? Morah is in the middle. The middle is compassion, empathy, tiferet, in the Kabbalistic spherotic structure of things. It's balance. Because the answer is, because morah is not about bitterness, it's about empathy. It's about feeling the sadness of another person. So yeah, you can eat the morah and just feel bitter in your mouth, but that's not the point. The point is that you feel. Can we feel for our ancestors thousands of years ago when they suffered? It may be difficult, it's a long time ago, but if you tell the story and you think about genocide, in our own time, the Holocaust, it's not difficult to elicit a feeling of empathy, of even more than empathy, almost blood-curdling anger, actually, about what was done to our own brethren just 60 years ago. And the same was done over 3,000 years ago. So it's about empathy with people who have suffered, and with people who suffer today too. And this is again a central theme. You find under a chuppah, the highest point of joy in a Jewish life, a wedding ceremony, you break a glass. It's the same idea. It's empathy. You remember there are other people who don't necessarily have a complete life right now. There's something that's broken in this world. So when we sit Passover, it's not just some type of nice, gung-ho, transcendent experience. It's real. There is sadness in this world. And there's sadness at our tables too. And that's what I always find the beauty of Judaism, is that it doesn't escape or deny the pain of life. You meet Jews who've suffered. You also see they have an unbelievable sense of humor. How does that work? Usually you'd think someone can't be that humorous, even though they do say there's a thin line between tragedy and comedy. Okay, so some say humor was the way to relieve ourselves, a way to somewhat soothe ourselves. But it's deeper than that. When you have seen pain in your life, you get to see a certain part of existence that weakens its hold on you. And you're also able to be lighter about it. Because it's like you see the reality. It's not the illusion, oh, everything is beautiful like a movie. You realize reality. In many ways it's humbling. And in many ways you learn to also know how to be light. If I need to explain that further, I can, but I think the point is clear. So when we come to Maror, even though it's a holiday and it's a joyous holiday, it's about recognizing that, yes, all our experiences here is also recognizing that there are people who are in pain. Maybe yourself as well. Empathy for your own soul is also a concept in Judaism. Empathy for others. As a matter of fact, when you have empathy for others, it helps God have empathy for us. So this point of Maror is a type of sensitivity, you can say, this stage. And it's also a vital element in the 15 steps of achieving transcendence. And again, in the second stage of the 5 steps, we're talking experiential. So if matzah is humility, Maror is empathy. And then from the Maror we go to the next stage, which is Korach. So Korach, historically, Korach really means to bind together. It's a sandwich. So historically it was based on the fact that there was a question how you're supposed to eat the matzah and the maror, combined, not combined. So Hillel came, and that's what we say, Kain Asa Hillel, they would combine, so we call it the sandwich. Your sandwich. What's Korach, the technical step? You take 2 matzahs, in it you stick the Roman lettuce or whatever it is that you use, and that's the maror. And you have a combination of really step number, what do we have here? Step number 13 and 14. So Korach is a combination of empathy and humility. That's really what it is. Or, if you want to put it in a little different words, it's a combination, the duality of humility, matzah, and sadness. Now, how do those two things work? So as he says in Ecclesiastes, that some of the contemporary music world made famous in their songs, that there's a season for everything. There's a time to cry, morer, and there's a time to be joyous. In a sense, matzah, even though it's not directly joy, but it's a positive experience, humility, matzah, freedom, and bitterness, they're not seen as divorced from each other. You'll find people often try to separate the two. The beauty of life, if you really want to appreciate it, is knowing how to ride through it, to know that even in the best of times, not to forget that there are also difficult times. And in the worst of times, then, you will remember that there are good times. People who master the balance of the flow of life, like take an expert swimmer. An expert swimmer is who? Is not someone that can overcome any storm. He knows when to swim, when it's calmer, and when there's a storm and the waves are too strong, a person like that will let the waves carry them. An inexperienced one will try to fight it. So riding the waves of life, the ups and downs, the morer of your life, the matzah of your life, the wine of your life, is a vital element. So combining the two in this 14, this is the 15th step, right? Yeah, this is 10. The 10th step. I mean, I said 14. This 10th step, which combines 8 and 9, is essentially the idea of a certain, fusion and integration of the cycles of life. At this point, before I go to the last 5, I will say, you could say to yourself, if you really do this right, you could spend half a lifetime just doing one of these 15 steps, let alone all of them. And I feel it, even when I say it, I feel overwhelmed myself by what I'm saying. And I want to just point out, make it practical. Don't expect, and you don't have to go into the Seder with that type of attitude of you have to master all of this. You know? Because it's a difficult thing to do, and even the great tzaddikim, the great spiritual masters, and I had the opportunity to see a Seder held by some like that, they usually took one of these or 2 steps and focused on them. So my suggestion to all of you, even though we do the 15 steps of the Seder, my suggestion is to really look at the ones that you, in a sense, you may need most, that resonate with you most, that seem to jump out at you. And those others you can focus on a little, but it doesn't have to be with the same intensity. It'll just make it a little more manageable. Because you see, it's much easier to do a Seder by rote than mechanical. Maybe some of you are feeling that way, that before you came here, you said, hey, it's much easier to just do it mechanically. This is getting a little too heavy and too difficult. It's true, it is. But hey, this is called a spiritual journey. If you want a spiritual journey, it's not easy, my friends. So I suggest, if you want it to be meaningful, my suggestion would be is to choose the ones that either resonate or speak, like Magid, for example, I think is one that is pretty, people can identify with, communicate. Maybe you have to choose a Seder table where you can feel that you can speak with people there. And or maybe some of the others. But really to try to do this intensely, it's going to be a little difficult, especially if not everybody at the table is up to it, as you can imagine. So I just wanted to be a little practical. And now we eat. Okay? Where's my meal? Huh?
After you finish.
Oh, okay. Shulchan Aruch. So here, usually people think the Seder is over, but it's not over, because in an interesting and fascinating way, the Shulchan Aruch, the regular meal, is elevated in the Seder. It's a step. It's the 11th step. Now, what is the last five steps? If you recall, I said the first 5 was acclimation, preparation, mindset. The second 5 were experiential, where you actually eat the matzah, the maror, the sandwich, etc. And the last 5 is really like the climax, the high point, the apex, the zenith, all the synonyms, where you come to a type of resolution or conclusion. And Shulchan Aruch is the first of them, the 11th step here. Shulchan Aruch literally means a set table. It doesn't even mean to eat, it means a set table. And there are those that ask the question, if you just set the table and you don't eat, did you keep the mitzvah or not? So obviously someone has to eat the food. But the point being, and I'll describe why it's called set table in a moment, The point is this, that ultimately here is where the real life plays itself out. And it's an interesting thing. If you look at most spiritual systems, and I've studied them for this particular reason, you'll not find many, except those, Judaism and some that are derived from Judaism, that make a big thing out of a meal. Jews have sanctified food. We've turned it into a divine experience. I know it sounds funny. Yeah. So we have a disproportionate amount of food, I should mention. Begins with a K, kosher food. I think a kugel, kishke, knedlach, kreplach, kartoffel. Anything else? I never figured out why, but that's just as an empirical observation. So the reason it's interesting is because you would usually not identify a meal with a divine experience. We are human beings and we need to eat and sleep. So for our sustenance, we need to survive. But it would be more identifiable with survival, biological survival. Yet you find in Judaism that meals are sanctified. You have a Shabbos meal, you have Yom Tov meals, and you have, in the time of the temple, on the altar they offered animals and there was a meal made out of that for the priests. And then of course, maybe above all, the Seder meal. It's a meal. Shulchan Aruch, it's a full meal with its own distinct recipes and so on. And the reason goes back to what I said earlier, because transcendence from a Jewish spiritual perspective is not about escapism or asceticism. It's about immersion. It's engaging the world and seeing how you are there. Just to give you a contrast, an example. It's a contrast between Bertrand Russell and Maimonides. Bertrand Russell was once asked, how can you, they caught him doing something unethical. Surprise, surprise. Yeah. And he was asked, you're a professor of ethics at the university, how could you behave unethically? And he said, I don't understand. I also teach mathematics and I'm not a triangle. You know? Which, for most of us, in the scientific academic world we live, it makes total sense. You don't have to be what you teach. You are what you eat, not what you teach. You know? And you can be a doctor and teach people all the vices of smoking and smoke yourself. It's a common thing. We're so-called objective experts, don't have to be what we teach. Now that may not sound disturbing to some of you, but from a Torah point of view, it's very disturbing, because it goes counter to the whole concept of integration and unity. So here's Maimonides' statement. You want to know who is a truly wise man, a Talmud Chacham, a scholar, a real person to respect? You don't look at his scholarship or her scholarship. You don't look at his or her ability to communicate, their brain power, analytical power. What do you look at? You know what he says? You look at how they eat, sleep, do business, walk, talk, the simplest things in life. How they speak to children. In other words, you want to see the depth of a human being, you don't look at when they're at when they are on stage and they're performing what they do best. You look at the things that are the mundane acts. And that's where you see refinement. That's where spirituality plays itself out. And this is one of the ultimate, in a way, beautiful paradoxes of Judaism, that you can achieve more through an act. More deeper spiritual heights are reached through a simple act than through the deepest meditations. Not to dismiss meditation and its power, but if you want the profundity of the essence of the divine, it's through the simple act of a mother reaching to a child. The moments that are not so glamorous and not dramatic and no one's giving you an award. So the Shulchan Aruch of the Seder is the stage. That's where it plays itself out. And that's why it's part of the Seder of Passover. It's part of transcendence. And in a way, it's the test that the 10 first steps really worked. Because you can master all the 10 and you don't know how to eat like a mensch. You know how to treat others at a table. And you just revert back to your beast because now you're hungry. Then what does it say about what you achieved in the first 10 steps? So this type of fragmentation or compartmentalization, I would say, is unacceptable. So Shulchan Aruch teaches us, here it is, now is a meal. Are you going to eat differently tonight than you ate last night? When you say Manishtano, how is this night different than all others? It's not just when we ask questions and we're dipping water into salt water and we're eating matzah more. Of course, those are all unique. Here's a meal, not unlike any other meal. And will you eat in a different way? Will you be more sensitive when you take the bread in your mouth, matzah in your mouth, to recognize that you're elevating divine sparks? And the same thing with the soup, and the same thing with other dishes. One of the great mystics, Rebbes, his name was the Rebbe Rashab. He was once given a plate of soup with lakshan, noodles. So though noodles, the regular noodles are not kosher for Passover, but there are noodles that are. They're made out of potato starch or whatever. And he took a spoon, and he took the noodle and the soup in the spoon, but the noodle slipped out. It does happen to the best of us, right? And it slipped out, and he was heard saying quietly, the noodle isn't ready yet. See, he didn't just see it as it slipped. He saw that the noodle was not yet ready to join with me in some cosmic dance. This may sound funny, but for a person who's as attuned to spirit, they see the world that way. They see the universe that way. Think of it this way. There was one of the great Rebbes, the same Rebbe, by the way. He's walking with his little son in a field, in a garden. And the little boy took a leaf and began rubbing it. You know, you rip off a leaf and you rub it. You don't even notice. And his father reprimanded him and said, what right do you have to just take a leaf for no reason and just rub it? Destroy a part of existence. So this isn't just words, it's a sensitivity. Talk about the greening of America and all that. The sensitivity that all of existence is divine, including the environment, and that every part of the world has divine sparks in it. And it's our job to elevate them, not to dismiss them, not to ignore them, and it's better, if you're not going to elevate them, let them be where they are. If you're ready to elevate them and find some way, then the leaf will be happy and you'll be happy. So this noodle wasn't ready yet. So think of it when you sip the soup and see what the food says to you. So that's Shulchan Aruch. It's about elevating. It's a Shulchan Aruch. The table set is like an altar, and we can turn the table. I don't want to use the expression in the Pirkei Avot. It says you can turn a table to something that's the opposite of life, or a table can come to life. Around tables of our homes, and think back when you were children in your home, the tables where a lot happened. Who was at the table? Was your father and mother always went to you at dinner, or they never were home? Or one of them wasn't home? What was said at the table? What was discussed? Tables that were beautiful, that came to life, was when the family joined together, bonded, they felt. They weren't just eating and getting over the meal and everyone's reading a newspaper during the meal and not looking at each other. So things like that, small thing, it's a table. It's not a big journey, it's not a holiday, it's not a journey, a trip we're taking. Where do children get their experiences? At these small little things that are not dramatic. The regular meals, the regular mundane meals day after day. Not necessarily the gifts they have and not how many televisions they watch. So Shulchan Aruch is a real test and a real battleground, you can say. And I use the word battleground intentionally because lechem, mina aretz, lechem, the word bread, in this case matzah, is from the word battle. It's a battle between the spark and the material. Who will prevail? And that's up to us. Whether it'll be the moitzi or it'll be the matzah. Whether we will draw the spark out, or we will allow it to be trapped or locked in its material place. And Shulchan Aruch, this comes alive in a full meal. It's not just matzah, it's not just murr, it's a full meal. That's step number 11. Then comes what they call the so-called conclusion of the Haggadah. This already is a shorter part of the Haggadah. It begins with Sofan. Sofan briefly means hidden. So transcendence, freedom, is not just on the conscious level, it's also on the unconscious level. So Sofan is the unconscious. Now you could say, how do you access the unconscious? It's unconscious for a reason. It's unconscious. We're not conscious of it. But in Jewish mysticism, what they teach is that when you're able to deal with your conscious levels, then new levels of your unconscious emerge. Think of it like potential talents. If you are locked in your life and you're unable to find freedom and transcendence in your own experiences, rest assured that your potential strengths are also going to remain locked. But if you're able to actualize the part of your life that's in your control, and experience some transcendence, some freedom from the traps, from the constraints, what happens next is that there will be an emergence. And what happens is your unconscious will begin to feed you. So this doesn't come into the Haggadah till step 12 here, because it can't emerge until the rest is done. You have to be able to so-called master your conscious life before your unconscious can speak to you. And many people don't really know how to reach this point because, as I said, they're unable to go through the earlier steps. So tzofen technically is we eat the afikomen that was broken. If you remember in step number 3, right? 4, sorry. Step number 4, when you broke the matzah, the bigger part was left for this stage here, 12, where you actually eat the afikomen. It's not part of it's considered to be like the dessert of the meal, so to speak. But above all, it's really resembles, that's what the idea of being hidden, the unconscious within all of us. So in a way, when the Jews left Egypt, that was on a conscious level. When they received the Torah and then they built the Mishkan, the unconscious began to emerge. In our own lives, it will never go another order. You have to some way deal with your conscious experiences before the unconscious can be addressed. And that is also, as I said, a healing, a power of growth and transcendence. Okay. To reveal the unrevealed. Berach is we make the benching after the meal. You do this at every meal. But here it has particular power. You punctuate any material experience with a spiritual beginning and a spiritual end, and then the material is easier to elevate. So before Berach, before the meal, we said the Haggadah. We washed, we made blessings, Moitzi, Amor, and so on. Now, at the end of the meal, you make Berach. Berach in Hebrew comes from the word bracha, like Berach, to bless, to bench. Berach also means to graft. There was, like sometimes you graft, you draw, you can connect two pieces by grafting them together. So Berach is a form of drawing energy. So here we have an example. For example, every day in our lives, and throughout the day you're involved in your material activities, like the Shulchan Aruch, set table. Before you begin your day, in Jewish tradition, you start with a prayer, a blessing, Moda Ani. And before you go to sleep, you conclude with a blessing, I entrust my soul to you, God. In a sense, by surrounding your material life with spiritual stuff, it helps elevate even the part that's in between. So Berach is like the so-called counterbalance to, or the other end, I could say, the other bookend to the Shulchan Aruch that followed the so-called spiritual preparation before it. That's Berach, and it's drawing down energy. It's like concluding the Haggadah as we come to the close. Then comes step number 14, which is Hallel. I don't know if you know this, but Hallel, even though usually translated as praise, Hallel really means to shine. Comes up Behila Neira, it means to shine, the flame that shines. What is praise? Why do we praise God? God needs our praise. Well, think of it, why do we praise each other? Why do you say thank you to someone? Why do you give a compliment? So on a basic level, on a ostensible level, it's a type of appreciation, acknowledgement, like a mensch. Someone did something for you or did something important or kind. It's appropriate to acknowledge it and not to ignore it and not to minimize it and dismiss it. It's a form of humility even, because you're like recognizing something and acknowledging it. That's the same idea with praise of God. It's not about praise, some compliment because God needs to be exalted. It's acknowledging the gifts in our lives. So as we come to the conclusion of the Seder, it's like looking back at your life and know there are blessings. Yes, there are also challenges, there are also questions we may have to God, and many things that we don't have answers for. But that cannot minimize that which we do can see as blessings in our lives. And there's no person that doesn't have a blessing in their life. So as we come to the end of the Haggadah, as the Jews did when they left Egypt, they said thank you. They appreciate it. It's another act of humility, it's another act of sensitivity, But in this case, it's not just sensitivity to those around you, it's also to God, to the blessings, and even the blessing to be able to sit at a Seder in a freedom is something we have to appreciate. This wasn't the case 100 years ago, 60 years ago, a few hundred years ago. Our grandparents and grandparents and ancestors did not have the luxury. Some of them sat in Seders at the thread of their lives. Some couldn't even do it because whatever situation they were in. So Hallel is really just stepping back and recognizing that, and not just being so self-contained or self-absorbed that you forget about everything else. And what comes in return is you shine as a result. You shine because you are able to get away from your own needs. You're able to say thank you for something beyond yourself and acknowledging it. So it's very much part of transcendence as well. So next time you say thank you to someone, it's a transcendent element. It means you recognize something outside of you. And it's not only because you gained, but it's because the thing deserves acknowledgement, deserves respect, deserves that type of approach. So Hallel, we say Hallel in special occasions. When a miracle happens, when an extraordinary event happens, we thank, we praise. And that's what the Hallel is about, which is really the conclusion of the Haggadah. But, as it is with everything in life, especially in Jewish life, it can't just end there. So the final step is Nirtzah. Nirtzah. Now Nirtzah is actually the most mysterious of all 15 because you don't do anything. What do you do by Nirtzah? You don't even say anything. The Haggadah is finished. So it just says in the Haggadah there's a 15th step called Nirtzah. Every one of the 14 steps, it was an act. You said something, you blessed something, you ate something, you tasted something. Here, none of that. And this is the ultimate act of real transcendence. You know when you transcend, when you don't feel that you're there anymore. As long as you are experiencing, there's a subject and an object, it's not transcendence. It's what they call today being in the zone. When you're in the zone, you don't sense yourself. Nirtzah really means that essentially that you are saying that God has accepted all our prayers and our blessings. That's where Nirtzah comes from, the word that it's satisfying, it's accepted. It's having a type of sense that you have been accepted and you can accept yourself. And it's not necessarily the act you do or the ritual or the taste or whatever it may be. It's just really peace. Have you ever been in a moment where you could sit in your seat or whatever it is and just feel at peace without having to do anything? That's what it's like. So I wish upon all of us that we could get to that point at the end of the Haggadah. It's being at peace. It's like knowing that you were blessed to be here at this moment in this place, and you don't need anything more. You don't need to perform. You don't need to show off. You don't need to be loud and express yourself. You exist. You're indispensable. God is satisfied with you. And then we say, of course, as we say at the end of the Haggadah, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, which has many meanings of its own, but essentially it's about redemption, that we are ready for redemption. Redemption is personal redemption, it's global redemption on all levels, but it's only possible when a person experiences some form of transcendence. Because the opposite of redemption is not being redeemed, is being enslaved. There's really no third option. You're either redeemed or you're not redeemed. You're either free or you're not free. And freedom is much more than just being able to move about. Freedom is about freedom of spirit. There are people who can sit in a chair for hours and they're very free, and there are people who don't know how to sit in a chair for a moment, restless, and have millions of frequent flyer miles, and they don't move anywhere. They're not free at all. They're just running for their lives. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. 15 steps, simple, transcendence. Your lives will never be the same again. I want to say one final note, if I may, personal note. This means we call this a workshop because it's intense a little. And I frankly, personally, my own tendency is to be a little lighter. But I didn't want to, so to speak, dilute this experience, especially with Mark sitting right here, and he can always, right? But so I hope I wasn't too heavy and too over your heads in any way. And as I said, my suggestion is, like it is in any real experience, You have to remember the spiritual journey is not an easy one. It's complicated, and it can be quite overwhelming. But the beauty of it and the gain that you get from it is enormous. And that's why I would suggest it's not about grabbing it all, it's about taking it step by step. I truly believe, because I know this from my own experiences, that if you come to a Passover Seder table, which will be next week, Saturday night, week from Saturday, and then Sunday night, 2 Seders, and you go to a place where you have friends that feel similar, or guests or hosts out of that way, there's no question that if you take some of these elements and you go with the attitude, even if you don't have it fully mastered down to a T, because no one does, including myself, but you go with the attitude that this is a truly historical moment, and one that can really open up doors, as I said, excavate resources, that alone is already a beginning. Because many people don't even know that, and don't even have hope that it's possible. And if you go away even without just leaving that message, with some little taste of it, that's a success story from my point of view. So you don't have to feel that this is about mastering. These 15 steps are quite complicated. The book of the Arizal, one of the great middle-age Kabbalists, has pages and pages, literally, of Kabbalistic interpretation of the Haggadah that we say in Passover Seder. And if you add the Zohar and many others, trust me, this is not masterable so easily. It's very, very difficult, actually, complicated. But they wrote it because, for the record, you need to know this. We need to know this information. These are deep cosmic and mystical secrets, and above all, I think, psychological insights into ourselves. And as you saw, I was pretty brief here relatively. If you go into each one of these, there's layers and layers that you can analyze, layers and layers of depth as you dig deeper. And as I suggested earlier, the key is to find the ones that speak most to you and really focus there more than anything else. Please see me as a resource, as a friend. If you have any questions, I'll take some now. If you have questions that come up later, you can feel free to email me. Some of you may get the emails I send out. On our website that Mark mentioned, meaningfullife.com, has a lot of material on the Haggadah. I have there an analysis of the 4 questions, of the Seder plate, of the wine and the matzah, things I really didn't discuss at length here at all. And of course, the 15 steps, you all have the handout, which has a summary of some of what I've said here. And as I said, questions this is the time of the year for questions. So 440, 400 questions, doesn't matter. Feel free to access me if you need to be. So I thank you for your attention, and I'll still be here for a while for take some questions. Thank you very much. Thank you.